Welcome to the channel, guys. Thank you for taking time to watch this video. In this video, we'll be looking at some of the studios that Microsoft has been affiliated with in terms of making acquisitions, and we will discuss the possibility and perhaps what we would like Microsoft to do in the instance. So if you like the video, please leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy the content, and leave your opinion in the comments below. What studios would you want Microsoft to acquire? So without further ado, let's get into this. So first off, before we discuss the actual studios Microsoft has been affiliated with, we need to discuss the fact that firstly, Microsoft has done a good job over the past few years acquiring Ninja Theory, Obsidian, and putting a ring on Playground Games was very, very smart. I think especially with Playground Games that's definitely one of the best acquisitions they could have made, period. Some of the fruits of this are already starting to show, like Ninja Theory and Obsidian, even Playground with their upcoming Fable. But some of these studios have already released games in this period. So yeah, kudos to Microsoft for those acquisitions early on. Double Fine, definitely. And of course, In Exile should not be underestimated. One other studio people don't like to talk about in these acquisition talks is, of course, World's Edge. At XO19, Microsoft announced that they created a studio dedicated to the Age of Empires series. So World's Edge is that studio. So Age of Empires 4 is being created by World's Edge, but they also work with other studios to manage the IP. So like Age of Empires 3 and 2, the definitive editions are developed by other studios, but the studio overlooking that development is World's Edge. Kind of like the way Battletoads was released by Rare, even though it was actually developed by Dilala Studios. So that's something that goes on with World's Edge as well. They do have about 40 developers, but that's, I think, for Age of Empires 4. So kudos to Microsoft for setting up these teams, and even the publishing house that's able to get as many third-party developers to work as second-party developers closer with Microsoft publishing the games. So examples will be through this discussion. Now, when talking about the acquisitions Microsoft has to make, we need to understand that Matt Booty and Phil Spencer have been very clear about the kind of studios that they are looking for, right? They need studios that have a rich history, a history with Microsoft, or a success history with themselves. So they're not just looking at studios that are just coming up right now per se, but studios that have proven themselves in the industry. If you look at the studios they've acquired, that's definitely true for all of them, right? Double Fine has been around for years. They've produced game in, game out games that are successful critically, right? Same thing if you think about Obsidian or In Exile. Fallout Las Vegas is perhaps what everyone points to. So they need teams that have a successful history, right? Then they need studios that have multiple teams, right? Microsoft wants to keep Game Pass active with games coming in without too much time, right? Without waiting for too much time. So they need studios that have got multiple teams. If you see Ninja Theory just released this Bleeding Edge game, right? But they have another team. Secondly, the teams themselves that Microsoft are interested in are teams that need some sort of financial backing, right? Not studios that are independently working very fine, are doing exceptionally well. They don't need to be acquired, right? They don't need to be acquired. So that's why they're not interested in such studios. So they want studios that actually want to be bought. So this actually makes a few things different about some of the thoughts I had about these studio acquisitions. So, and generally my view is that, like most people over on the internet, Randall Thor especially, Microsoft needs at least one AAA studio and they need maybe 2 mid-tier studios, 2 AA studios. In those, they need at least one of them being Japanese. Microsoft is butchered in Japan. So that's my view, that's my take. So what are some of the studios that I think Microsoft could be in talks with, and the ones that have been talked about in most articles online? So firstly, everyone attributes Moon Studio because of the success of Ori and the Blind Forest, Ori and the Will of the Wisp. It's definitely been one of the games of the Xbox generation this time around, and Moon Studio itself is small enough to be acquired, and with these past 2 games they've created a rich history. So it's definitely a studio that would be making a whole lot of sense for Microsoft. But Moon Studios recently, especially the private division recently announced an agreement, a contract with Moon Studios. Not really sure if this is an acquisition or if they're just going to work on the next game that will be published by private division. So this kind of takes away the possibility of Moon Studio being acquired, at least right now, while they're working on this project with the private division. And then rumors last year went around that Microsoft were basically shopping in Poland for studios, and most people really wrote about this, right? So a few that people thought about were, of course, People Can Fly, which is a studio that has developed the Gears series in the 360 generation. Together with Epic Games, they basically made Gears of War what Gears of War is, right? So this is definitely flown around, and most people believe this can actually work. But yeah, People Can Fly is actually owned by Epic, so not really sure how that can work. But it's definitely something that would make a whole lot of sense. But again, we do have a coalition already working on Gears. Another one is Techland with the Dying Light series. The Dying Light series has been shown on the Xbox stage a couple of times, and I think this could also be a good buy. But unfortunately, Techland came out with a statement stating that they are not interested in an acquisition and they are not being acquired. So this is probably not a studio that is being bought by Microsoft. But there are other studios, so like the Bloober team, the one developing the Medium, they developed another horror game last year, and if you think about it, they have been on the Xbox stage 2 years straight at E3 last year in 2019, and this year at the Xbox Games Showcase with the Bloober teams, the Medium, right? So this is definitely a studio that looks like it has potential, but it is a publicly traded company, so yeah, there are other investors in the company. It's not a private company, so there are other investors in the company that might have a say on that. So Bloober team does look like it has some potential, and I hope they can push. I'm a fan of horror games, so the Bloober team can definitely deliver on that, right? Another one that people like to talk about is, of course, IO Interactive. IO Interactive is responsible for the Hitman series. They are perhaps very, very good with shooter games, and I think Microsoft needs something like this. This is definitely in the AAA category, but they are doing very well. They've actually even formed a new subsidiary, so I don't think they need Microsoft money right now. They look like they're doing well on their own. It would be good if Microsoft acquired them, because they would acquire the subsidiary also that has just recently been formed. But yeah, it looks more unlikely because of the need for the studios to want to be bought in the first place. Then of course, another one that keeps making rounds is Relic Entertainment. So Relic Entertainment is responsible for the Warhammer series, and at the Xbox Games Showcase, the new Warhammer Dark Tide was actually one of the console launch exclusives that was announced at the Xbox Games Showcase. Now, if this was purely an exclusive that you know, was not going to come to any other console. Not sure if it's a timed exclusive, but if it's not going to go to any other console, it would make a whole lot of sense, and it would be signs that maybe talks are already progressing. But this company is owned by Sega, so I'm not sure how that would work. And speaking of Sega, Sega itself has been in a lot of what people are talking about, right? But Sega is kind of big. Yeah, it's kind of big. Definitely Microsoft needs AAA studios, but I think Sega is kind of off that peak that we knew Sega for back in those days. I don't think they are actively developing big franchises this time around. So myself, not really excited about the rumors in the Sega direction. But one that I would think about is definitely Asobo. So Asobo Studios recently pushed out Flight Simulator, and they look like they have an agreement for maintaining Flight Simulator for a couple of years. So it looks like there's a solid relationship there, and Asobo itself has a very rich history, especially in supporting Microsoft products. Kinect, HoloLens, and other products are very, very well supported by Asobo. And Microsoft Flight Simulator is perhaps the definitive reason why Microsoft should put a ring on Asobo. If I was Microsoft, this is the one studio I would wholeheartedly purchase. Flight Simulator is definitely going to be a factor, especially in the next generation. Xbox Game Pass needs games that can continue to be developed, right? But that can also have a spectacular launch like the way Flight Simulator has. And not just about Flight Simulator, everyone who's played A Plague's Tale seems to have enjoyed it. I've not played it myself. I'll be getting into it towards the end of the month or beginning of the month, October. It looks like it's a nice narrative-driven game. This is the kind of studio that would help us out with the narrative type of games. So, like A Plague's Tale. It's in Game Pass. You guys can try it out. I think this is a very, very good studio. So Microsoft, if you guys get one studio, this is one you guys should definitely be looking at. And of course, the big gun, the big talk over the last couple of months has been Warner Bros. Games, right? So the Warner Bros. Games is what everybody is so amped about. It's what everybody wants to happen. And it's the biggest studio. In fact, perhaps it's got multiple studios, more than anything else that we've discussed so far. In fact, purchasing Warner Bros. Games would instantly double the number of Xbox Game Studios that are with Microsoft. At $4 billion, it seems like a stiff price, but Microsoft can do it, right? If there's any company that can do it, it's Microsoft. So why not just get Warner Bros. Games, right? If you think about the Minecraft acquisition, Minecraft itself was 2.5 billion, right? 2 or 2.5 billion, somewhere in that range. And yes, it was a successful buy, but think about it, that's one game. Of course, with Microsoft's help, they've made it the most sold game of all time, the biggest selling game of all time, right? But with Microsoft, they do have the money. If they can buy one game at $2.5 billion, what's $4 billion for over 15 additional studios, right? The caliber of studios in Warner Bros. Games alone is able to rival any other studio that we've perhaps talked about in this video this far, right? If you think about Rocksteady and the ability to deliver the DC games, right? The recently announced DC games was that Batman. I've forgotten the title, but my favorite, especially the Arkham Knight. Those are really, really high quality games. If you think about the Mortal Kombat developers, NetherRealm, right? Those guys are excellent, right? If they can match NetherRealm, right? such that even NetherRealm can develop, for example, Killer Instinct. That would be something. That would be something. In fact, Ed Boon has teased in previous, not this year, but in previous years, what it would be like, right? The fact that it would be awesome to have Killer Instinct and Mortal Kombat in a game where you have something similar to DC versus Mortal Kombat versus DC, a game that was released back in those days, right? So these are high quality game studios, and if you think about others like Monolith, right, and other studios that develop like the Harry Potter franchise, you know, the games in the Shadow of Mordor or the Mordor games, right? These are really, really high caliber, high quality games, and the other studios with their smaller projects and the ability to support the other studios is something that would be very interesting for Microsoft. I think with Warner Bros. Games alone, even if Microsoft does not purchase any other studios and they just make the Warner Bros. Games acquisition, it would definitely be the de facto Xbox game studio, period. In fact, they would probably just make the individual studios work on individual projects so that we have Game Pass games coming in every now and then. But with this single purchase, Microsoft, in my opinion, would be set for the next generation, and people would see the seriousness of the Xbox team towards console gaming, because people keep saying no, Microsoft is not as committed to the Xbox franchise, to the Xbox team. But hey, come on, they've purchased so many studios in the past, 8 studios or so in the last 2 years alone, and investing heavily in xCloud. But with this single purchase, would definitely beat the Sony studios, regardless of whoever else they purchase. Now, my problem with this is that, of course, the licenses to the different games are probably not going to be in the deal. That's what's been reported. So it doesn't mean that Microsoft would own the Arkham games, but it would make it very, very easy to put them in Game Pass. So that's a good point. And they could still develop other IP, especially if they are trying to jump onto something new. They could develop other IPs, but the idea is that the raw talent is right there. And this is a deal that's not going to be around. I don't think a deal like this will come around anytime soon. When was the last time something like this happened? I can't remember, right? On the other hand, we also are thinking of the price, the $4 billion. If you think about it, the Metro Exodus developers cost about $80 million, right? $80 million for the developers of Metro Exodus. The game Metro, it's interesting, especially the most recent one. Very, very good, supports real-time ray tracing. Very good, especially on the RTX cards. The games look very, very good. So for $80 million, you'd think that's very cheap for such a studio. Or if you think about Insomniac, it's rumored to have gone for about $200 million by Sony. Sony acquired it for around $200 million, right? They are a high caliber studio, but definitely the price, $4 billion, seems a little bit too high, considering the acquisitions going on right now in the industry. But again, none of these studios are Warner Bros. Games. None of those studios are at the caliber of Warner Bros. Games. Just one game from the Warner Bros. Games studios in 1 year is going to make us happy, as we'll have at least a really big game coming out from these studios every 2 or so years, right? And these are trusted game developers. I don't think they've failed in recent years in this Xbox One generation. So those are my overall thoughts about the studios Microsoft has been linked with, and my view, especially on the Warner Bros. Games studio situation. Rumors are stating that Warner Bros. Games has put the studio out of the need for an acquisition. They're saying they no longer want to be bought. but most people think this is a play to just keep the negotiation at $4 billion so that people don't, companies don't reduce the price in their negotiations. So Microsoft just open the books, open the checks. If it's going to cost $5 billion, put an extra $1 billion for the IP, right? Definitely do it. So those are my thoughts. Just leave a like, give me a comment. What do you guys think? What should Microsoft do? What studios would you be interested in? I know some have been linked with the Farm as well, the Farm and other studios as well, but those are the ones that especially caught my attention. So leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content. This video ends here. So she out.